Welcome to the epicenter of sports and entertainment. This is the Rude Dog Show. Now, here's your host.
Yes, it is. That's me. I know. I must admit it. I can't hide. I can't lie. This is Rudy Reyes on the Rude Dog Show. Thanks for showing up, everybody. Happy Friday to everybody tuning in live on Twitter, live on Facebook, YouTube, the entire metaverse as we know it. And it could change tomorrow. Who knows? But there are a lot of things that are not going to change tomorrow, and that is the status of the NFL and the concussion policy associated with what happened last night during the Cincinnati Bengals hosting the Miami Dolphins, who were at 3-0, looking to go to 4-0. Cincinnati Bengals looking to stay alive in the AFC. And when I say staying alive, I don't mean the PG version. I'm talking about the non-PG version of staying alive, especially in the AFC. I know it's only week 3. I'm trying not to put all the cards on the table. But when you look at this game, it's certainly something to look forward to last night. At least I thought it was going to be. And unfortunately, it wasn't Tua's night, to say the very least. And I'll expand on that here. Thank you for hosting me today on Today's California, Today's Canada. I was live on LinkedIn, but that link did not quite work out. But this episode will be posted on the RudeDogShow.com. And I'm live right now, so tune in. Questions, comments, anything that may come to your mind, we can certainly talk about it here on the Rude Dog Show. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And again, happy Friday to everyone. Look, I want to jump into this, and I've heard from multiple people, multiple sources, multiple players. Richard Sherman got involved. You heard George Wrightster, who got involved. Thanks for the commentary. I like my hat too. I only have 41 of them, all different, of course. Not one is the same. However, what the same and the interpretation of what the same is on the field are the same results. And albeit when you look at Tua Tagovailoa, it's almost a repeat of what happened against the Buffalo Bills. No, not the stumbling and bumbling and crumbling of him underneath his feet, and clearly wanting to get the help that he needed to have from other coworkers on that offensive line. Not only helped once, but twice. And he left eventually under his own power to some extent, but for the most part, it was other people who were assisting him off the field. Now, interestingly enough, again, as I stated, you had a lot of people weighing in on this. Some people had some bad things to say, and other people just clearly did not understand why Tua Tagovailoa was out on the field, considering what happened against the Bills last Sunday. Of course, in a short week, you would expect this to be a very anticipated game, at least for some people it was anticipated. Clearly, they weren't going to play in Miami because that Hurricane Ida had essentially made landfall in Florida. And they weren't going to put anybody at risk. Matter of fact, Tampa Bay Buccaneers decided to leave the area and basically traveled to Minnesota. And of course, Minnesota is in London playing against the Saints in an NFC matchup. So there are a lot of moving parts in regards to these teams that are trying to go forward, who are trying to find ways to host their games and other stadiums to host their games as well. Now, when I look at this Tua situation, and no one's really talking about this, so I'm going to bring it up. When you're looking at what happened on that exact play, and when I say play, I mean to the effect of him getting slammed down to the ground. Last time I checked, of course, for those that did not see that god-awful laydown in the aftermath that was associated with that, here's Tua on the ground with his fingers obviously perplexed and crossing, going multiple directions, which is a clear sign of a concussion. Now, when I say that, I mean to the effect that he was swirling, his mind was going 10 different places, almost in an unconscious state of mind. Now, concussion is not something that should be taken lightly at all. As a matter of fact, the NFLPA is in an ongoing investigation along with the NFL in order to find out exactly what happened and were the Miami Dolphins in violation of the protocol. Now, the protocol, as I understand it, and everybody else, again, you have your own interpretations, but the way that I'm reading it is this: symptom-limited activity. So if concussion is found, the player's prescribed rest, limiting, and if necessary, avoiding any activity whatsoever to aggravate the symptoms associated with what we look at as concussion. Now, with that, athletic training supervision has the ability to call it on the field and say, you know what, this is not going to work. He's out of the game. This is a concussion, and these are neurological third-party people that are contracted by the NFL in order to look at this stuff during halftime. Now, during the halftime game between the Bills, I'm going to go backwards a little bit, between the Buffalo Bills and the Dolphins, Tua cleared protocol in the halftime part of the game. So before the second half actually started, he showed no signs of concussion. He cleared the protocol and in turn able to go back on the field. Now, that's what we know of. The difference between what we know and what could actually have happened is, come on, coach, I want to finish the game. Tua Tagovailoa, I want to get back in there. I want to be there with my guys. We need to get this win. And of course, the coach is going to be on the side of, we need to get this win. We need to get there. Are you sure you're okay? Are you good? I don't want to put you, under any duress whatsoever. And certainly Tua, as hard of a guy and working on the field as well as off the field that he is, he said, you know what? I'm going to stay here on the field. I'm good. So the independent neurologist said, well, okay, if you look good and you pass these tests, then you can go back out on the field. Now, he stated, Tua, that his back was clearly in pain and hurt, and I would imagine that 300-pound plus linebacker landing on top of someone doesn't exactly scream, I'm going to get up without any type of scratches or bruises or anything associated with being landed on by someone that huge and on the ground. Now, if you've seen that play, and I watched that play, all signs pointed towards, yep, that's concussion. Lower back, okay, fine. His entire back, more than likely. I mean, linebackers, if anybody's ever been tackled by one, they do not discriminate in regards to laying on top of you. Now, the NFL rule states that you cannot apply your entire body mass on a player as you're tackling them, and essentially can be penalized for that. Now, Buffalo, for all intents and purposes, very strong defensive team, and they want to make sure the quarterback was down to the ground. Now, when I seen that linebacker laying on top of Tua, I thought to myself, wait a minute, that appears to be in violation. So he used his body mass laying on top of him to ensure that he was sacked, and in turn, there was no flag on that specific play. Now, fast forward to the play that happened yesterday, where I'd shown this very disturbing photo of Tua Tagovailoa on the ground with trainers associated with trying to get him to come to consciousness, and unfortunately were able to do so in some varying capacity. Now, with that, if you look at his fingers, they were a complete disarray. So what that tells me is that he was having an episode which surely and purely shows that he's having a concussion. Now, based on my understanding, the player, not naming names, almost threw him to the ground. I mean, throw. I don't mean that he tackled him and put his body on. We're talking slam down on the ground as if there was canvas underneath him in a WWE match. That should be illegal. You don't slam players to the ground. I don't care what player it is. I don't care if it's wide receivers receive a lot of leeway when it comes to the types of penalties associated with corners grabbing onto their neck and putting them to the ground. Now, that in of itself should be an issue. The problem is that it's not a penalty. It's not a penalty other than just to be a horse collar. Now, for someone to get slammed to the ground, clearly there's a lot of force associated with putting him to the ground. Now, I understand a sack. Okay, fine. So get penalized. Not the end of the world. But he was essentially slammed to the ground. And I don't necessarily understand why that was not even remotely thought of as any type of penalty. This isn't a different type of match. You don't necessarily have to slam someone to the ground in order to get your point across. I don't understand why he was not penalized over this. I don't understand what the NFL was thinking in regards to being able to put Tua back in the second half of that game during the Bills outing. And then thirdly, no one's even talking about the hit that was laid upon Tua Tagovailoa. And it's almost like an afterthought. We're almost desensitized to the fact that the quarterback's going to get taken down, granted, but how he's getting taken down, the way that he's being taken down and being slammed to the ground, that should be a penalty. There should be an absolute penalty associated with slamming a player down to the ground, pads or not. I mean, these pads are only going to protect you against very minimal types of impact. And the sad part about all this is that no one's even talking about that. And I think that the rule needs to be updated, not necessarily just to protect the quarterback, but that we're all on an equal playing field in regards to not only the interpretation of what that rule actually is, but how that rule is designed to prevent further injuries, such as concussions, from occurring. Yes, we have new helmet technology. The players wear new helmets, and this is a technology that's just going to get better and better and better. But what about the rest of the body? We understand that players get slammed. Are they going to have different types of, I don't know, carbon fiber protection on their back, preventing them from feeling pain when they hit the turf with a guy at 250 to 300 plus pounds all over them? No, there is no such thing. That has not been developed yet. Okay, fine. People might want to call me soft in regards to these penalties, and there shouldn't be a penalty associated with that. Let me know what questions you have. Bring them up. I'd be happy to talk about them and to go at length about it. I'm more than happy to invite any guest on and have this conversation. It's not necessarily a debate, it's more of a conversation, because we need to get to the solution and not focus on the problem. The solution is how are we going to prevent players from slamming quarterbacks to the ground, or other players for that matter? If a wide receiver is going to get any type of horse collar associated with being tackled, and that's penalized, why can't someone in a linebacker capacity on the defensive side of the ball who's attacking a quarterback not be penalized for slinging him to the ground as if he's a golf ball or a tennis ball with a racket? There has to be something associated with rules to define what that actually is and what that actually should be. The problem is that there hasn't been. And I don't know necessarily that you're going to see any rules anytime soon that will be associated with preventing the quarterback from being looked at like an actual target. This is Rudy Reyes on the Rude Dog Show. I am live on Twitter, live on Facebook, live on YouTube, and of course, throw me a follow at Rude Dog Reyes on Twitter. And if you have any questions, anything at all, feel free to comment here live on the show for a little bit of time here left that I have. If you have any questions, anything at all, I'll be happy to throw that your direction. We can have that conversation. So when I look at that photo of Tua laying on the ground, I thought to myself, well, I already know what's going to happen. And clearly he's in concussion protocol. He was left off the field, taken by a stretcher, as well as his neck being stabilized and immobilized so that way he doesn't turn it or move it or anything of that nature. He ultimately flew back with his coworkers on the plane, along with Coach McDaniels. And today was the day where there was a lot of questions answered. But what question wasn't answered is, why was he by himself fielding questions? Where is everybody else? Where is the trainers? Where is the assistant head coach? Where are the guys who basically said, nope, Tua passed protocol during the Bills game, I guess we're just going to put him back in, and then ultimately find themselves in a situation where now Tua's out for an infinitive amount of time. And to be honest with you, if I was the NFL, I would keep him out until this investigation is completed. But I don't believe it works that way. I don't believe it. You're going to find Tua Tagovailoa not going to be out on the field, because as soon as he completes protocol, it's exactly what's going to happen. Now, as I was stating, that there's a phase 2 an aerobic exercise, a football specific exercise in phase 3, and then you have this extremely long dissertation by McDaniels, of course, transcribed by the Cincinnati Bengals team. And what's even interesting, in a sidebar note here, is that you had all of the Miami Dolphins players out there hoping for the quarterback to get up and be revived and be able to move his extremities, things of that nature, which eventually did happen when he was in the hospital and went to one there in Cincinnati. But not one Bengals player was out there doing the very same thing. So what does that tell you? Well, that tells me that they didn't care. Now, yes, I understand the canned commentary by Joe Burrow after the game. And of course, Joe Burrow, I have nothing against Joe Burrow whatsoever. But the fact that he gave a very dishpan hand type of reply when someone had mentioned Tua's injury and the fact that he was concussed, and essentially he just gave this real pancake answer. Well, it's real terrible to see someone go through that, and it's a real tough game, and just a bunch of garbage in my opinion in relation to that actual question. He remembers what it's like. He knows what it's like going down. he missed the entire 2020 season because of that injury. And it's not as if Tua Tagovailoa had any injury like that, but a concussion is a very serious thing. And I don't think anybody is taking this into account. I don't think any players taking it into account unless they've maybe had one, or maybe they don't believe they actually had one, but really did at the end of the day, at the end of the game, on their way home. They get into an accident. What the issue is, I do not know. But I know that McDaniel's press conference certainly conveyed a very systemic message in regards to his relationship with Tua. He stated it was an emotional moment. It's not part of the game that anybody signs up for to deal with, but it's always a possibility, especially in football, and there are lots of other sports, snowboarding, skiing, soccer, you name it, where concussions are prevalent. And Kanya and Roberto, Fairfield, California. Hey, thank you very much. I'm not in Fairfield. I'm actually here in Clovis, California, but thank you for checking in from Manila in the Philippines. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. I guess I'm having a global reach here. That's always nice to know. Thank you so much for the commentary. I really appreciate that. Thanks for tuning in. There are a lot of things that I really did not care for about that press conference. I understand McDaniels is almost a stoic kind of guy. His reply is relatively stoic. The conversation he had with them was of a stoic nature, obviously because of the circumstances surrounding Tua Tagovailoa, who's not doing all that well right about now. But he just wants to be with his family, and it's completely understandable. Mike McDaniels goes on to say that it was just that a lot of people had struggled. If he didn't have a job for the organization and the rest of the players, he didn't have an obligation in mind in regards to how to handle players and coaches after a situation like that. When you look at the game, and I quote, with your short yardage and you couldn't punch the ball in when you had down by the goal line, could you use one of the earlier tricks in the game? Of course, he replied, yes, absolutely. When you lose to very good teams, you always point to that. So it's always an after-the-fact type of thought, always a after-the-fact type conversation. And this is exactly what happened in a post-game conference after the Bengals game. And you guys can check this out on MiamiDolphins.com, and you can find the post-game presser, of course, dissertated by the Bengals in order to put that on their site, which I think is quite interesting to be de-encrypted by the Cincinnati Bengals to make it visually palatable on their website. There was a message sent to the halftime team. What was the message? Well, the message was for that Tua to be standing there watching everybody play, and that he wanted to put everybody in position, effort, because of the teammates and because he had went down. So there are a lot of things in regards to how this whole thing evolved. I think the NFL really needs to do a better job in regards to what that protocol looks like, what the interpretation is, going back to review all of this, because again, this is not something that's going away. Concussions will always be a part of the game. And as an example, last year there was, I believe, 38% decline in football activities because people weren't going to sign up for football because of situations just like these, and specifically more so concussions. And I can't say I blame the parents. I'm a parent myself. And at the same token, I wouldn't want to put my kids in harm's way, especially if there are no procedures in place to help give them and keep them in a very solid quality of life type situation. And McDaniels went on to say that, a lot of things go into making better medical decisions. There's independent specialists that look into it as well. There's entire protocols, but you're talking to the player as well. And I think the player finds themselves where they want to get back on the field. As I stated earlier in the show, they want to get back out there. So they're going to tell the coach whatever they want to hear in order to get out there. And I think that's one of the reasons why players need to get out of their own way and allow for coaches, neurologists, neuropsychologists, and anyone else associated, including medical doctors, to make the determination that ultimately you shouldn't be out on the field. You have no business being out on the field. I don't care what position you play. And in that, you have to look at this as being a very careful and cautious situation. But the NFL could revise this. They need to go back to the drawing board in regards to what can we do now? How can we change this moving forward? And oddly enough, Roger Goodell was there last night in Cincinnati to watch this game. And of course, everything that came full circle for him in the booth. And I can only imagine what was going through his head, thinking, oh man, here we go. This is the bad publicity I'm really just trying to stay away from. And I just the look on his face was just absolutely astonishing. Whether or not they wanted to take video of his face or not, and the dismay that he felt, that remains to be seen. But with that being said, I think that because he was being cleared was based on a variety of things. First, I don't believe that he was ready to go back in. And I don't know that the actual testing was not necessarily not approved by the NFL or NFLPA, but there needs to have a lot more associated with being able to clear players. So you know what? This is a list. We've added on 5 more protocols that we have to go by, we have to look at, and this is part of why you're not going to get back on to the field anytime soon. And I think that if there can be a revision associated with making this become a reality, I just believe that there's a lot more that can be done to save situations like this from becoming exactly what they're turning into, which are unnecessary investigations into clubs. The NFL being questioned. The NFL stated they're going to be fully transparent in regards to this. And I really believe that needs to be the case. There has to be complete transparency, but not just transparency, but change. So by the time, the updated versions of what this actually looked like goes back to the drawing board of, well, we need to redo this. We need to fix this. We need to alter this and add on even more protocols associated with being able to tell a player, you know what, yes, you're able to get back on the field. You cleared the 5 others or 4 others, whatever the case might be. But in this instance, man, it was just tough. It was tough to watch him get slammed to the ground, for him to be toted up in the air the way that he did. And I'm just more worried about Tua's, quality of life than anything else. Will he clear it? Probably. I would hope so. He's a tough guy. He's led by a lot of people. He's a real leader. I personally have never met him, but just based on post-game interviews, conversations that I've had with others who have spoke to him at length, certainly you can make the argument that he's a guy that always wants to be out there. And I can't say I blame him, but at the same token, you have to recognize that this is for your best of interest to not be on the field. This is Rudy Reyes on the RudeDogShow.com for just a few minutes longer. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I certainly appreciate it. I'm live on Twitter, live on Facebook, YouTube, and everywhere else you can find me, for that matter. It'll be posted on the RudeDogShow.com. And make sure you throw me a follow at Rude Dog Reyes on Twitter. I look at this in a hindsight being 2020. And when I say that, I mean, where do we go from here? How does this get solved for? I think I've outlined that relatively well in regards to what can be done. And hi, Bill, appreciate you. Happy Friday to you as well, sir. Happy Friday to everybody. I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you very much. And I believe that the NFL can revise this. This can be, we can recover from what we've seen. We can be rest assured, and hopefully moving forward, that other players that have these types of situations find themselves not getting in the way of themselves and not being able to convince coaches and athletic staff and trainers and neuropsychologists and neurologists and medical doctors by saying, no, I'm fine, but yet my eyes are crooked. Or I'm not able to stand up on my own, and being able to follow a finger with my eyeballs. Certainly things can be added to that list in order to prevent something like this. Yes, this is after the fact. This is after the concussion, and it doesn't happen until after it's all said and done. So hopefully there can be change associated with concussions moving forward for all players, not just quarterbacks, but in sports in general. But this one just certainly lays the foundation and the outline that something needs to be done a lot sooner than later. This is Rudy Reyes on the Rude Dog Show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate it. This will be on the RudeDogShow.com and wherever podcasts are. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.